Years ago, I was actually 26 years old, and I was in Colombia working with the poor there, very, very poor. But when I was there, I was reading this book by this very, very famous Colombian, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature, but not for this book, and the book is Love in the Time of Cholera. And if you've ever heard me, it's one of my top 10 favorite books because I felt like I found the secrets of the universe in this book. It is such a great book. But if you're under 18, you should not read this book because it has some adult parts to it. And you have to understand, the book is amazing because it defines what love is through this story. And the story is about, I'm going to tell you the story. This young woman, she's a teenager, she meets this poet, and she's in love with this poet. He's in love with her. The parents know it's wrong. They try and separate, and they can't. They give up, teenagers. So they get to meet in the marketplace, and they meet in the marketplace, and she looks at him, and she says, I don't know what love is, but this is not love. And she turned around and walked away. After that, they won't meet until the end of the book. And she seems a little cold at the beginning of the book. And then she meets this doctor. And she kind of loved the doctor, but not passionately. But she did know this guy knows what love is. And they have this marriage, and their marriage is great. Year after year after year, until they're like in their 70s, they have this great marriage. And even when he dies, the book opens with this. He dies because he falls out of a tree, and he looks up at his wife and says, God only knows how much I loved you, and then dies. But the weird part is, throughout the story, and this is hilarious, all this married couple do is argue. They argue about stupid stuff. Nothing ever really big. They just argue about stupid stuff like, where do you put the toothpaste? How do you you roll it up from the bottom? And they have these huge arguments about really nothing that is just silly. And once in this interview, because I love this book, they asked Gabriel Garcia Marquez, they said, where did you find this crazy couple that argue about goofy stuff? And he laughs and he says, well, it was my parents. And he said, I was a teenager, and my parents would always have these strange arguments about silly, silly things. And I remember once when I was a teenager thinking, oh my God, they love each other. They love each other, and so the only thing they have to argue about is silly things. And a really good marriage is when you've sacrificed year after year after year, and all you have is love. And for some reason, he's not quite sure, after all these years of sacrifice, you do love the other person. You don't argue about anything important. But there's always this little bit of anger over all the years of sacrifice. And so the name of the book is Love in the Time of Cholera. And cholera in Spanish could be the disease, but cholera also is another word for anger. That when you really love somebody, they can drive you up the wall. And the opposite, the poet, you also get his story through the, Gabriel Garcia said when he was a teenager, he realized, that's what real love looks like. Not poetry and eating flowers and singing. It's bickering about toothpaste. He said, it's a couple that sacrificed everything. Then you have also in the story of the poet. Remember the first guy, and he was in love with her. He would eat flowers. He would often say things like, you make me feel blah, 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 blah. You kind of like him at first. And then you see what happens to him when he gets into his 70s. And his entire life, his definition of love was, how do you make me feel? Well, nobody can handle that much responsibility. The person you're married to is not responsible to make you feel a certain way. Does that make sense? So she was right as a teenager to say, I don't know what love is, but that's not love. Because in the American idea, love is the bachelor and all these women compete for the rose. I mean, who can make you... Like, that is not love. And the worst part is, when you get to him when he's in his 70s, he's actually a pedophile, which is shocking. But you kind of think, well, what's the difference? From him as a teenager to this disgusting old man, his definition of love was always, what are you going to do for me? And why, when I read it, I realized I came upon the secret of the universe. It's not just a story about love. It's a story about religion. The same way that doctor symbolizes real love, and real love is a life of sacrifice. The poet, his definition of love is, what are you going to do for me? How are you going to make me feel? Do something for me. It's also a definition of religion. Some people think, like the poet, who's a sociopath, religion is, how does this help me? What does this give me? What are you going to do for me? Versus the doctor, where religion is really about pouring out yourself in love. And if you ever notice, we're living in the time of cholera. There is this anger in the world. And our only response is actually the doctor. There's cholera in the book too. But in a world filled with cholera, anger, our only real response is to be like the doctor and seek out a life of self-sacrificing love. That's why I was like, oh my gosh, I get it. But that's also what real religion is. And on Palm Sunday, we read the Passion, but the Passion is this point that religion is a marriage. That's what religion is. It's a wedding ceremony. The Passion that we read, the death and resurrection of Christ, it's a huge wedding ceremony. Now, I've mentioned this before, but a couple people last week were asking me questions because under the cloth is the purple one. There's a crown of thorns here. There's a white robe over here and a chalice over here. If you know Jewish symbol, those are all three wedding. So the Passion of Christ is a wedding ceremony. In ancient Judaism, when you get married, you'd get this white cloth. It's the only time you get to wear it in your entire life. Other than that, the high priest wears it. That's what you get on your wedding day, is you get this wedding dress. One time you get to wear it. That's what's on that panel. You also, one time in your life, you get to wear a crown, and that is your wedding day. Christ's crown is not gold, it's thorns. It symbolizes self-sacrifice. And the chalice, just know that Jewish wedding ceremonies start with the groom offering the bride a chalice of wine. And if she drinks it, technically they're in the first stage of marriage. That's what Jesus does at the Last Supper. When you receive communion, you're being wed to Christ. And what you're vowing is a lifetime, like the doctor, of self-sacrificing love. Not what do I get out of it, but what do I give? And so the whole Passion story really is a story of a wedding where we're supposed to, year after year, fall more deeply in love with each other and God. And even like the first couple, Adam and Eve, Adam's side is split and Eve is born, and it happens in the garden. The first act that gave life to humanity is self-sacrifice. And the garden is a place where lovers dwell. If you notice, Christ, his side is split too, and the church is born. And where Christ is buried and resurrected is a garden. It's returning back to the Garden of Eden. The door into the Garden of Eden is self-sacrificing love. And when Adam and Eve in Genesis decide, no, we won't practice self-sacrifice, that's when they lose the garden and go into the desert. The way of religion is the way of this love. Or even like the woman who breaks the nard, the oil, and anoints Jesus, that's also a wedding symbol. You get perfumed oil before you get married. And she is generous. And Judas is the one who thinks religion's got to do something for me. What's in it for me? Looks at it and says, "What? That's ridiculous." Well, in Mark, the crowd says that. Because they think love should be teaspooned out tiny bit by tiny bit. Real love is just generous. So all these things are wedding symbols, which I love. And Jesus at the crucifixion, he doesn't say anything. It's not because he's angry. It's because he's already given his life away on Holy Thursday. Or when Pontius Pilate says, "Don't you understand? I hold your life in my hands." No, he doesn't. Jesus already had given his life away at Holy Thursday in the Eucharist. Now he has nothing to fear. And after the Last Supper, they go singing, which sounds strange because at that point he knows he's going to be crucified. And they sing. It's kind of like Bishop Barron mentioned this, and I love this. There's this saying to he's blessed, this priest who died when he was 28 in the Spanish Civil War, Martin Pasquale, and just before he dies in a firing squad, they took a picture of him, and he's this good-looking 26-year-old who has this smile on his face before he dies. He's actually smirking as guns are pointed to him because he had already given his life away on the Eucharist. What else are you going to do to me? I've already given my life away. You have nothing. Or Maximilian Kolbe, the Nazis, he died in somebody else's place who was a husband and father. And the Nazis couldn't kill Maximilian Kolbe. He was supposed to die in fear and pain, and yet he kept singing. And I love the fact that Nazis would have to say, "Stop singing, you're supposed to be afraid." He had already given his life away in the Eucharist. All he has left is love to offer. Same with us. In this wedding ceremony, Holy Week is when we examine. These are our vows. We don't have to fear losing our life if we've already given it away in love. Like the doctor, God only knows how much I have loved if you've lived a life of self-sacrifice. And so why the palms? The palms, Bible symbol. When they dedicate the temple to God, for 7 days they wave palms and lay them down. When they rededicate the temple, because it was destroyed, for 7 days they wave palms. It was a symbol of a dedicated space, a purified place for God to dwell. Remember, they built the temple, and God hadn't shown up yet. God was supposed to come from the east. So today, when they have their palm branches and waving them, it's a way of saying, they're ready for God to come and dwell in the temple. That's Christ. But we wave them today because it's our hearts that we want purified to truly be a place, not what's in it for me, but a place of love. So we wave the palms. Yeah, we're dedicating a space, and it's our heart. Also, palms were also waved after the battle victory. When they're about to be destroyed, they had this strange victory. They waved their palms. It's a symbol that love will conquer hate. In the final victory, love always wins. I love it. Even though it's outgunned, outmanned, love will win by the way of self-sacrifice. So the custom of Catholics is you take a palm, you can either form it into a cross. I can't do that. I can't even cook, so weaving is not my ability. Or you take the palm and you put it behind a cross, and every time you think of the cross, it's supposed to remind you that love will win. Love will win through self-sacrifice. If we live out our wedding vows to God and truly die to every bit of selfishness, we are wed to God. And as I said, the palm is a sign of victory. Real religion is one that preaches self-sacrificing love. So when you look at the palm and the cross next to each other, remember your wedding vows. And so together, let us stand and profess our faith.